Good evening. Welcome to the June 4th Booth Bay Harbor Selectmen's meeting. Would everyone like, 24th. Oh,
Yes.
thank you. June 24th. Flashback in time. Selectmen's meeting. Would everyone like to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? This evening, let's go ahead and announce our introductions about who's here. We've got our town manager, Tom Wooden. Full board this evening, Trish Warren, Denise Griffin, myself, Mike Tomko, Ken Fitch, and Wendy Wolf. Move right into our town manager announcements. Tom, what do you have for us tonight?
Just a couple of things, just a reminder, this Wednesday, the town office closes at noon, as it always does in celebration of Windjammer Days. Also on Friday, the office will be closed, as it is every year, for closing the books for the fiscal year. Some of you may have noticed that the basketball, pickleball courts are all painted. So they have been used quite a bit by both basketball players and pickleball players, so that's nice to see activity on those. And last but not least, some of you may know about this or not, I don't know, but there has been a few conversations regarding next year's state bicentennial and getting tall ships to come visit the state of Maine. And along with Mark Gimbel and a few other people, we're in conversations with tall ships to see if we can secure a couple of ships to come to Booth Bay Harbor for that. They're planning on, I believe it's Bar Harbor, Rockland, Booth Bay Harbor, Portland. Nothing's been firmed up yet. It's fairly costly to get those ships to come here, so there's a lot of logistics to be worked out. But I just wanted to be aware of it, that it's being talked about. So,
Do you know what the time frame is for the Class A tall ships?
the plan is to have them here on the Thursday of Windjammer Days next year. So as the Windjammers leave here, the smaller ones, the bigger ones will be coming in that afternoon.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
but there's nothing guaranteed yet, but it's being discussed.
A lot of logistics to
A lot. Yep.
work on. Great.
That's all I have right now.
Okay. Let's move on to selectmen's reports. I just have three quick ones. For those of you who don't know, we are right in the middle of our Windjammer Week, and tons of activities, great things happening already through and around town. Welcome everyone that's come to visit, and please enjoy your stay and your time here. There's some really spectacular things for everyone to do and see. And sort of like a follow-up to that, I just want to give a personal shout out to the parking attendants. Our ambassadors, basically, is what they are, and I parked in the footbridge lot this past weekend, and couldn't be more thrilled with the positive and wonderful way that they represent our town and the questions they answer, and just friendly, great folks around. So, job well done. Thanks, guys. And the last thing is the Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission, which is run, the executive director is Mary Ellen Barnes. Bob Faunce is retired as Lincoln County planner. Mary Ellen is going through a process of looking for a new county planner, and there's some great candidates. She hopes to have someone probably by the middle to the end of the summer, and there's also a community development specialist that she's looking to hire. So the county's looking to partner with all the towns, all the 19 towns in Lincoln County, and especially here in Booth Bay Harbor. We've been fortunate to receive a lot of help from them, and look forward to continue help. That's all I have for selectmen's reports. Anyone on the board have anything? Sure.
I just want to bring everyone up to date at the after the last meeting. At the last meeting, we talked about the crosswalks on Union Street, and that Tuesday, Tom, I, and the DOT met with Nick Upham, and we looked at the three crosswalks at Park, Atlantic, and Union. That one, the one down by School Street, and the one in front. Well, there is none in front of Brady's, and I was very, very happy that we had everyone here, and no one seemed to think there were any problems. I think Nick is going to be working on this, and hopefully we will have some resolution to those pretty quickly, I hope. That's the plan.
Thanks, guys.
I just wanted to acknowledge the Boothbay Region Maritime Foundation, the Register just ran a story that they were successful in their Land Remains Future grant, which is really spectacular. It's highly competitive, and the town provided letters of support for that grant, so it's really gratifying to see their work hopefully moving ahead. So congratulations to them.
Wendy, did you want to say anything at all about the joint Boothbay Selectmen's meeting we had, talking about next steps for JEDC?
If you all read Joe's story in the Register, I think it captured the conversation, including quotes, fairly well. We had a workshop with the Boothbay Select Board, and Dan Breyer, the Boothbay Town Manager, was there also to talk about progress on the Economic Development Master Plan, which several of the key activities are moving along in terms of housing, downtown development, broadband we're going to talk about tonight. And the question really before the select boards is, do we want to formally continue our collaboration together? And if so, what would be the best way to do that? That would keep the towns both informed and leveraging each other's sort of talent and resources. And that's kind of where the conversation stands at the moment. We'll be having a follow-up workshop to grapple with that latter question. So anyway, it's always good to meet with our neighbors.
Great. Thanks, Wendy. Anyone else? Okay. Let's hear about financials from Julia.
Okay, you have before you your expense and revenue sheets. Total expenses year to date, $7,876,028. Total revenue year to date, $7,930,927. Does anyone have any questions about the expenses or revenues? We have one more payroll, and I will be doing a liability warrant on Friday, so you'll sign at the next meeting. But to close out the books, as well as just end of the year adjustments for health insurance and everything.
Julia, I have a very small question,
Okay.
very minor, expensive, but on the warrant recap, warrant 83, there are two charges for general government admin travel, and I guess that's travel and meeting, or TNG, travel, training.
Who's the vendor on the left-hand side?
Viola Lee and Bob's Point.
They had to, for occupational health,
Okay,
for their drug testing.
okay, great, thank you so much.
And total accounts payable is $173,378.30, and the bank balance is $2,400,215.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions for Julia? It appears that our expenses are nominal, but just slightly above last year.
I'm sorry.
It appears that our expenses are slightly above last year's?
They are.
Okay,
The budget's up high.
okay, great.
Yep.
No, everything looks really good. Okay, thank you, Julia.
And I'll give you, once the books close, I'll give you a clean expense and revenue sheets with all the adjustments, and obviously Fred will be here to begin the audit sometime soon. Okay.
Terrific. Okay. Minutes. I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes from the June 10th, 2019 meeting.
Second.
Great. Are there any questions or discussions? Hearing none?
Whoa. Yeah, discussion.
Oh, okay.
Were those the minutes where there were kind of one or two?
There were suggestions that were
Yes,
incorporated.
and they were incorporated?
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you, that's all I needed to know.
Okay, good. Any other questions? All in favor of approving? Great. Thank you for this, Tom.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see, licenses. We have an extension of liquor license and a liquor license to approve, so let's do the extension first. This is for the Booth Bay Harbor Inn, 31 Atlantic Avenue.
I think that's a special amusement license.
Yes, thank you, Wendy, a special amusement license. This is for unamplified vocal or instrumental music, Class A, entertainment other than music, Class B, amplified vocal or instrumental music, Class C, and dancing, Class D. I see it's been signed off by code enforcement officer
And the police chief.
and the police, there we go.
Yeah.
And we've got the special amusement permit, great. Any questions about it?
I'll make a motion to approve.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, great. Any other additional questions? All in favor? Okay. And then we have a renewal for the Balmy Days Cruises, 42 Commercial Street. This is an alcoholic beverage and for Spiritus Venus Malts.
Move
I'm
we
so-
approve.
Oh, I'm sorry, my mistake. It's for Venus only and malt only. There we go, no spirits. So,
And
motion to move?
I'll second that, please.
Any questions? None? Anyone in the audience? Yes. Seeing none, all in favor? Great. New business. On the agenda, we've got a broadband presentation and discussion with the Booth Bay representatives. And this is also a place where we're going to discuss the selectmen's goals for the upcoming year. Because broadband may be part of that. Do you want to just do a quick review of what everyone would like to say for their goals for the next coming year? Should we do that first?
We have guests, so why don't we do that first?
Yeah, I know.
Sure.
I agree.
Okay, great. This evening, we've got Dan Breyer, Christina Ford, Desiree, there you are. Welcome. What I was hoping to do tonight was that we could get just a quick synopsis of where Booth Bay has been with their efforts and look at the Maine Community Foundation grant and the process that Booth Bay Harbor may choose to do, and then talk about some direction from there. So if you guys would like to, possibly give a quick review.
I'm Christina Ford.
We have a mic,
Christina.
Christina, for you.
I'm Mike. Okay, I'm sorry.
Make sure it's turned on down the light screen.
Yeah, if you sort of stand down here, the
Yep.
camera will get you.
Good evening, and thank you for asking me to come. I'm delighted to say that I was very taken by Chairman Tomko's synopsis of where we've been, because it just showed that you really were trying to understand all that we've done. It's been complicated, and we've learned things. I would say that where this started was actually last August, when we had a meeting in Booth Bay. And we invited the Unity Foundation and also Axiom to come and talk to us just in general terms about broadband. And they had quite a few caveats about our progress. And I, at the time, had learned about the MCF grant. And so I had participated in a telephone call to talk about questions for applying. And we all agreed we would apply. And only one town applies. I mean, they don't want to try to deal with all of us as well as we collaborate and all that. But Booth Bay wrote the grant, but it was for both towns. And subsequently, I think that in Mike's synopsis, it's very interesting because page 1, I thought, and page 2 really reflect where we were last October. October, the due date for this grant application was October 15th, and we made that deadline. And we didn't hear about whether or not we got it until December. And in that time, it was very clear. I mean, you all heard me say this. I would speak about what we were doing and what we were intending and say, I have come to the precise end of what I know. because broadband is something new to me. I may use the internet, but I use it. My husband's a writer, I'm a writer. We send text files. That is it. And so I'm a Luddite, basically. And so what happened in the time that intervened, I think that what Mike has written in pages 1 and 2 of his synopsis is really an excellent summary of what we all knew then. And we knew that we had much to learn. When we did get the grant, which was in December, I came back, and we all talked about what we could do. And I remember we had some information from the Lincoln County Planning Office about a survey they were doing with I think it's 7 towns in Edgecombe. And I read those surveys, and you should know survey research is something that it's just something I know. And I read those surveys and thought these are surveys that are in search of a subject. And I thought that, and Wendy also read it, and so did Mike Tomasello from the Booth Bay Planning Board. And then I got interested in what those surveys were trying to accomplish when I came to talk to y'all last January. I said it seemed to me that the survey was useful in a town in which people didn't know much. You're not hearing me?
You pushed the mute button.
Oh, I did? Oh. There. I thought you were going to push the mute button. Then I have a deal. He's going to tell me when to shut up. But anyway, when I came to speak to you all last January, I said I looked at these surveys and I could understand them from the point of view of a town in which people didn't know much about internet, and it was a kind of way of trying to get people interested, but that as a survey instrument, it didn't represent anything except the feelings of the people who happened to fill it out. And that isn't an interesting survey to my mind. And then I went to talk to the Island Institute, who knows a lot about this, and they said, well, and they said a couple interesting things to me, that when you go talk to a provider, they first of all say that their information is proprietary and they don't want to tell you much. They'll even show you a map of where they provide service, but they won't leave it with you. They won't let you take copies of it. But they also said, and in retrospect, it was an interesting thing. The woman at Island Institute said that, you know, Booth Bay and Booth Bay Harbor are a big enough market that it could be they will be a lot more honest with you than they have been with us. Well, that turned out to be a pretty interesting remark. But I thought what we need to do is find someone who knows more about this than me, which is practically everyone, to try to figure out how we should conduct a survey, who we should talk to, what we should learn about. And that was the impetus for our hiring a consultant who really did look at, what he did was a business analysis. Because what he figured out, which is something we had also heard in August from Unity Foundation, that you can't be driven by what the market is for the big providers because they'll just tell you what to do. You don't have any leverage with them. And what we learned then was that actually a lot of the grants we've been thinking about, I mean, I thought this when we started with the MCF grant, that we would be trying to use Connect Maine because they're trying to increase and improve broadband throughout the state. Well, they're trying to increase and improve broadband across the state in areas that don't have it. And one of the things that we learned when we hired our consultant was that if anything, Broadway is overserved. We have 3 providers and people have plenty of broadband, except in a few specific instances, which I think are mostly in Booth Bay rather than Booth Bay Harbor. The problem with Booth Bay Harbor seems to be, and I'm looking at Desiree because she told me this, that everything works pretty well in the winter, but that when the town fills up and the hotels and the restaurants are trying to use internet, that then everything slows down, and the example being at the library. And suddenly you can't do what you were doing. So what they needed was better service. We also had thought initially, it'd be interesting to take a survey and go out to different places and see what the upload and download speeds were. Well, one of the things we learned from our consultant was that that's almost an irrelevant task, because the agreements to provide the service only say they will provide up to whatever the upload and download is. In other words, if you say, you promised me, whatever it is, 10 something or other, and I'm only getting one, they say, yeah, we only said we're going to give you up to 10. So we learned a lot in this whole process. And we now have a good report. We also have a good report because our consultant worked with 4 of the large businesses in Boothbay and learned a lot about the different providers. He also got them to agree to help us learn how to negotiate with them, that they have learned a few things. We've had a little bit of luck with the state government, that we now know that we can get these franchises, specifically Spectrum, to come to the table because they need to work with us. So we've learned a lot, and now we're at the point at which we can go a little bit farther forward, and what Dan and I are here tonight to ask you to do is to consider, what is it, on page 3 of my report, is to get the man who was the consultant who knows all about this business, to get him to write an RFP, which we can use to see how we can bring these 4 providers, or maybe even more, there may be other people out there, to come to the table and negotiate with us and to give us a good contract. I should say, it seemed, at one point I thought we could perhaps put out an RFP to choose someone to write the RFP, and then I thought, that's a kind of useless waste of the money from MCF, because we have the man who wrote the report, get him to write the RFP. And then we will get the broadband committee, which we can talk about at some length. The broadband committee can now be constituted so that they can help us choose among the RFPs if we get any. When I say if we get any, that's an important point. I'm hoping, and I'm very hopeful, for the very reason that the people at Island Institute said, that these providers want the business in Boothbay and Boothbay Harbor, that they will come and they will negotiate with us. However, even if we get a response in an RFP, if we don't like it, we don't have to take it. And we could have learned something from that process and put out a better RFP. So I'm thinking that this is an instance in which we have some knowledge, we have a pretty good sense of the business climate in which we are trying to increase and improve broadband, and that we have a chance to make it better. I grew up with a father who raised me with aphorisms. One of them was, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I think here that we can venture to create this RFP and see what we get. We are not stuck with choosing one of them. We don't have to say something is the least worst. We can say, this is no good. We want a different solution. So that's, I think, is that enough? Did I turn myself off? I did.
Just at the end of it.
Okay.
Can I? Thank you.
I'll be very careful.
You'll be
There's just a couple things I wanted to add. The first is that when we do talk about upload-download speeds bottlenecking in the summer, on our library and anyway, a lot of that was our personal equipment was inadequate for the traffic we had in the summer, so it's a complicated issue. There's the speed on the lines and there's the traffic on the lines, but there's also, do you have the equipment at home to handle the multiple traffic? And we have remedied that with some help from a bunch of people, and we can connect so far an unlimited amount of people at the library. The second thing was that for me personally, I think most of you know, I'm the assistant director of the library. We do a lot of grant writing. And so when I look at the grant proposal we submitted to the Maine Community Foundation, I look at the wording that's in there and what we said we were going to do in what order. And I feel personally that it's really important to stick to that order and to do exactly the things that we said we were going to do. And if we don't do exactly the things that we said we were going to do in the grant proposal, or if we spend different amounts of money, I think we need to be prepared to explain ourselves to the people who gave us the money if we're going to be heading back for more money in the future.
Well, may I say something
Yeah.
to that? I'd like to say something to that, which is that I have kept the Maine Community Foundation up to date with what we're doing and told them that we are going to come. I think that one of the things that is very useful is the way we've approached this is very different from how towns would approach this same subject if they are remote and don't have much broadband. And we're going to go actually to Connect Maine and suggest to them that they follow the model that we've created, simply because there's a difference among the situations of different towns. MCF, I think they had a broad idea to try to increase broadband, and they know that there are going to be distinctions. So as long as we are in touch with them, I don't think that's an issue if we can make sense to them, and I believe we can.
So obviously we've done quite a bit of work in Booth Bay, but one of the reasons, or one of the things that we wanted to do when we came here tonight is we really haven't been able to engage Booth Bay Harbor as much as we would want. So we were hoping to hear from you maybe what direction you thought you were going to go, because we'd still like for there to be symbiosis between the two towns. I think it's very important that we start to get input from the harbor. And I don't know where you're at in the process. So.
Right here.
I think it's fair to say that we, aside from our select board, that's where this has resided, and we haven't taken any substantive steps forward, but there is some things that have been suggested through the grant application, which was to form a group and a committee of broad-based individuals, representatives from education, from the nonprofits, and
And the library.
yeah, yeah, and municipal and the business environment. So I think that's really important, so we can help refine and define where it is we're going and what we're going to do. So my suggestion would be that we put out the request to have individuals. Maybe we start to look at forming a committee, bring them up to speed on what Booth Bay has done, and look for opportunities to interface and where to go forward from here. I think there's some great things that the MCF application enumerates in terms of goals and work that can be done in terms of looking at gaps and users and speeds and to solicit the input. But I think that's where it would start for me personally, is to start with a good work group to move forward. So the rest of the board feel.
First, thank you, Booth Bay, for taking the lead on this element of the economic development master plan, because it was one of the priorities in the plan, and it was really great for you all to start it off, Christina, with the meeting with Unity Foundation and get the conversation going, because it had been talked about in generalities for a while. And I'd like to just see if I understand where the investigation and initiative is at present, and what I'm trying to understand, what is the purpose of the next step? Because you had talked about having a request for proposals and bring the 4 existing providers in the region together so that we would have some capacity to, I guess, talk with them and negotiate. But you had mentioned franchise. When I hear franchise, you had said franchise, but maybe that's not what you mean. Okay, so I'm usually, when you're negotiating, you're talking about giving people either exclusivity or preferential contracting or, so I'm trying to figure out, is that what we're trying to talk about, is bringing providers together so that you can say, geez, we have a target population here in the peninsula of, 7,000 or whatever, if you take everybody together. I know Southport is doing its own thing, and I know Nancy will probably weigh in on what's happening in Southport. And geez, we'd really like both expanded access. I think the recommendation of completing loops so residential can feed into business connection is an absolutely wonderful point. But I'm trying to figure out what are you trying to get out of that conversation? Is it trying to say that we're a big enough market that they should be more competitive in what they're offering to us? Or are we trying to give someone preference if they are offering us better rates, better service? So help me understand kind of how you envision the next steps.
Okay, I think I can.
Sure. Sorry. Red light on?
I think I can answer that. Our notion is that we know enough about the business that we can enter into a negotiation with providers, and not only the existing providers, but other providers who may be interested in coming. And I should say that tomorrow night at 6:30, one of the providers is going to show us the hotspot demonstration for Booth Bay and Booth Bay Harbor to show how it worked. That's at the town office. But I think, and it's included in Tom's report, that we need to have an executive session in which we discuss what terms we are after. I mean, this is not like a public hearing that we have about a planning, about a city plan, in which people talk about what they wish. We really want to be able to say, here is what we want. That's what we learned last August when the people from Unity and Axiom came. They said, figure out what you have, figure out what you want, and then figure out how you fill the gap. And so we know we have some gaps. In Booth Bay, I think it's less true in Booth Bay Harbor, but in Booth Bay, the gap is that we have some people that Tom, I think he refers to as outliers, or the special cases, people who are farther than 2 poles away. That's one special case. I think that in what we want to do is figure out, for instance, we know now that we have fiber that goes down Route 27. It does not have loops. And so we can say in a negotiation, that's fine, y'all, but you have to provide loops so that people can connect to us. And we're going to have all of the people who are providers or prospective providers, I'm sorry. We want them all to have a chance to answer what they can do. So we can say, here's what we want. How can you provide that to us? And say that for both Booth Bay and Booth Bay Harbor. And so it is a real negotiation. And so I think that requires some conversations in executive session so that we talk about what we are willing to do, what we at a minimum need, and we have to have people who are able to do a good negotiation. But this is a real step forward. It is to say, we have the information. We also know we're not happy with what we've got, and so we want it to improve. So, does that answer you?
Almost. Just tell me, what is as the municipality, what is our leverage point other than saying, we would like you to put loops in? Because unless we are contracting with them,
Yeah.
I would imagine if I were sitting on their side of the table, I would say, well, I have X number of customers, I'd like to get X more. How does the town help me accomplish that? Are you subsidizing my services, advertising my service? I'm trying to figure out what's the leverage point
Sure.
to make the provider do the things that we think are in the gap.
Well, that's a very good question. I think there are a couple of things that we have discovered. One of them is that I'm speaking now about Spectrum. They need to come talk to us because what they're relying on their franchise, as I appreciate what the legislature has done, is no longer valid. They need to come talk to us because they are operating on a franchise which has expired. That's one thing. The other is, and your question is a good one, why would they give us something more than they have already given us? And I think that's the point of this business analysis. It was really good. The problem in Booth Bay and in Booth Bay Harbor, but in Booth Bay has been a lack of competition. And so we have a provider who has just told us what they are willing to provide. And if we have a good RFP, we might get a little competition, and we have a leverage because these franchise agreements may or may not be valid any longer, so that they have to come talk to us. But the main point is with, and now I am speaking, it's only what I've read, but as I understand it, copper as the medium is about to be obsolete. And so what's happening with the providers who are using copper is that they have got a business model, they've got a investment in what they've already provided, particularly down Route 27, and they're making money on it. They don't have a business incentive to improve that investment. And so I think that with the leverage provided partly by the state legislature and partly by our willingness to bring in some competition, that we may be able to get something better.
Actually, that raises a question for me because it doesn't make any sense to even consider a provider that's using copper as opposed to fiber optic. I mean, at this point, if you're talking long term, I mean, why would you go with a technology that, okay, that would be helpful because I don't understand, and I think I need to before.
Yeah. I started this process feeling like copper cables were adequate for everything we needed right now, and I tend to not want to spend money is my first instinct. Fiber is really expensive, but copper is what we have now. Fiber is really expensive. You can do a lot more with copper than we're doing right now, but I do, as we design something and as we move forward, I definitely personally want to keep my eyes on, something that's going to work in 10 or 20 years from now, as well as it's going to work today, because while we're talking about building out and doing these things, I think we need to future-proof it. I want 5G.
Because from my understanding is, at least in Booth Bay Harbor, we have a fairly significant percentage of fiber already run in the town. So in other words, part of what we need to do as a town is we need to assess what we currently have before we can make a decision as to what we do with copper.
Yeah, those fiber to the home connections, they also call last mile connections, and when we have, it can still be a significant amount of money. Sweden does it.
You brought up the magic word, which is money. I think both of us are passionate about doing something that isn't just a short-term stopgap solution. We need a real solution here. And happily, Booth Bay has a TIF, which we have learned from our town attorney, we can use to provide, to pay for a build-out for improved service. And so that's a real carrot for their coming. So it isn't just that we want you to come to the negotiating table.
There's a carrot.
That's a real
now
one.
I'm hearing the first carrot.
But it's a great big carrot.
It is a big carrot.
You could even call it a parsnip. But the point is, I think, that we've both got some leverage because we have some help from the state legislature. We have some competition in getting into this market, but we also have some money so that we can kickstart a new system. And as part of that, we also make new terms. As you don't string fiber optics without loops, so that people can connect to it easily. And so I think it's a strong time right now, and I think we have the wherewithal to help do it. And I think that it will help the harbor because most of this is coming down Route 27. So if the harbor can use its TIF to jumpstart this new technology, that then you all will benefit from it. But we want you at the negotiating table with us, is the point.
And my understanding, the other incentive that we have to offer the cable companies from my Google reading about franchise agreements is that they need our permission to use our poles and have our rights of way. I guess that's legally dicey, and maybe they don't, but if they do in fact need that from us, then, we can withhold it, so a little bit of a bargaining chip.
Can anyone answer about the TIF dollars? Are those only to be expended in the TIF district?
No,
Or they could be used?
legislation is passed. Sorry. So no, legislation has passed that allows you to build out anywhere within your town. Yes, that would have been true. I think it was signed maybe within the last couple of weeks. It would have been true that we would have only been able to use it in the TIF district, which for us is from the country club to the industrial park, which still would have been a good trunk line.
Pretty good.
Yeah, but now with the passing of the legislation, we can use it anywhere in town. So, it does give you quite a bit of leverage because you can do a like for like. You could talk with a provider about we'll do a mile, you do a mile, but we get to dictate where the mile is. So.
Well, again, it sounds like you guys have done a lot of the research. I'm just feeling like we're behind. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just making sure we have some.
Oh, sure. Sure. Go ahead.
I'm all for thinking of the future, and I'm all for getting a better deal, so great idea. I'm still, maybe I'm just like a little behind the eight ball here in understanding all this stuff. I still don't understand, how do we know where all the gaps in the service are, and how do we know where those gaps are in Booth Bay Harbor? Because I thought initially 6 months ago, those are what we were really, that was like one of our primary reasons, I thought, for
In the
doing,
grant.
in the grant, for doing the study, so.
If I may stay here. When I said I admired what Tom wrote as a summary for where we were, he summarized what we knew in October. And that was when, this MCF grant to expand and improve broadband, it was their first attempt at that. And it was up to $15,000, and instead they gave many towns $7,500, and so they increased their spread. Well, what we've come to know now is that isn't really our problem. We have a few other problems. I mean, that's true in Willinocket, that there are people who don't have any broadband. That isn't true for us. We have there are a few places, and we can address them. I mean, it's what the report refers to as these, I call them outliers.
Well, I've always called underserved, unserved.
Unserved, there are very few of them. I mean, we would not, there was a USDA grant that we all thought was interesting that we could perhaps get, but when we read the requirements, we wouldn't get it because Booth Bay has a lot of broadband. What we don't have is coverage everywhere. The question about where do we have it and where don't we have it, they know where they're not serving people. And we know that people who are living 2 poles away down a long road aren't getting it. We had a public hearing and only, as you said, Mike, I think 3 people, but maybe only from 2 households, came because they knew how much it was going to cost them to have it extended down one of those long driveways, maybe off of Back River Road. That's right. But I think, as I appreciate it, the problem in Booth Bay Harbor is less that than what Desiree is describing, in which the quality of your service goes down, that it goes off sometimes, or you have to wait a long time to connect up with the bank, whatever. So I think, what's interesting about that, Denise, is that we know that the providers know where they're not serving. That's why they come to the meetings that the Island Institute described, and they come to the meeting and show you where where they provide service, and they say, you can't have a copy of this. And so I think with a little competition, we can perhaps, and also the possibility of giving some money to help them invest in a better infrastructure, that we will get a better result. In a funny way, the original idea, which was to make a survey so people would say where they don't have service and wish they did, it was almost as if you thought the result of the survey would make the scales fall from the eyes of the providers, and they'd say, oh gee, we didn't realize there were 1,000 of y'all out there who need service, and so we will provide it to you. I think what we learned in the business analysis is that they're making enough money from what they've invested in that they don't care. And so what we have to do is to sort of change the terms of the argument, which I think is going to be, first of all, with the carrot of the TIF money, but also with the stick that y'all got to negotiate with us. So, and gee, I hope it works. You know what I mean? But I can't tell you guaranteed it will. It's just I think that we have an idea here for putting out an RFP, speaking to our attorneys, and doing a good negotiation. And I think we may end up something that we'll be delighted with. But if we're not, if what we get back from them is not good enough, we don't have to do it. You make us sound better?
Well, what I can tell you is that Tom and I have sat in with 3 of the major providers, and they will show you the build-outs, but it's treated as proprietary information. In other words, when the meeting's over, it goes with them. But they are willing to give you those build-outs, but when it leaves, it's not very helpful for you to come up with a game plan. So that's how you get that information, and I know that's not a helpful answer. But that is essentially the answer. I think, Tom, you'd agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, Dan's absolutely right. Where the rubber hits the road is when you do identify those dirt streets that don't have service, it comes down to a business decision for all 3 of those providers. How much is it going to cost to run the service down there versus what they're going to get back? And most of the people in Booth Bay Harbor have 3 choices of providers. Many of them are underserved because they don't call their provider and increase their ability to have higher bandwidth. It's not that it isn't available. I mean, I have 5G with Spectrum, but the most important part is to reach those people that don't have it at all, and at least make it available to them. And I don't know if providing TIF money is going to turn around some of these corporations to get them to do that. It's an interesting idea, but it's certainly worth talking to them about it, see if they'd be interested in it.
I've been talking with some of the families that don't have service right now, and a lot of what they're going through is what we've all gone through. They call Spectrum, Spectrum says no, Spectrum says $16,000, and they call back, and they call back, and they call back, and all of a sudden it happens. So some progress is being made on that front just through a lot of time on the phone and a lot of asking again. So I think that one of the things that we can do, and maybe one of the things the broadband committee can do, is to help people make those phone calls and help people get through and get to the right department. It can be a half an hour on hold, and sometimes you don't know what to ask for or what to say, so having a person who's made these phone calls before can really help people get service. I'd like to see that happening.
And I think that's a good idea. There are many avenues we can pursue here, but what I really think is to change the terms under which the providers perceive this town and its prospective customers. They have felt like we've got this investment, we're making money, we're not going to do anything else. And so just change the terms of that conversation in addition to public education and public support and helping people learn how to use the internet and all of that. I mean, there isn't one single solution. There isn't any idea that you would say, well, that's not a good idea. I mean, it is a good idea. What Desiree just said is a great idea. I think, though, that something that's more fundamental will also help So, I mean, that's what we're saying, there's no bad idea here.
Joanna, did you have some comments?
Yeah, I just, speaking of changing,
And would you introduce yourself just?
my name is Joanna Breen, I'm the director of the library, and a Booth Bay Harbor resident.
Thank you.
In terms of changing the terms of negotiating with the firms, maybe one of the things a broadband committee could do is look at internet becoming a public utility. Because that would definitely change everything, right? And the only thing that I want to bring back to the conversation is the terms of the grant that was written. And I think the way that I would suggest Booth Bay Harbor could, join the work that's been done is to really get behind putting the committee together. Because I think that a committee could answer a lot of the questions that we have and flesh out some of the information that was provided in the last report by the consultant. But it seems like it would be a little bit early for an RFP because we still don't know what we're looking for or who has what. And that seems like just the work for a committee to do and for an inter-town committee to work together to define where the gaps are, what we want, how we want to leverage the two towns against the broadband providers, and even doing some of the digital literacy stuff that was talked about in the grant that the library said that we would do. As far as the digital literacy goes, working with people, what is broadband? When we say this, what are we talking about? Why do we care? I'm not sure that people in the community still know or really are picking up on the conversation, but it's happening nationwide. Everybody's talking about the need for broadband, but do we just need it because we think we do, or what? So I think just bringing back the committee and getting the committee fired up to answer some of the questions, and take the report that we got from Tom Mayotte, flesh that out, and then we'll have something to talk to providers about. And I think we've got the talent, as was pointed out in the report, to get a great committee going to really put some details down to work with. That's all.
That was very helpful for me, because I was trying to figure out what it was we were trying to do. I wasn't sure. I mean, that sort of says that. I mean, I think it makes it a little clearer to me. I wasn't sure. I'm still not 100% sure, but it's a little bit better. Because I have a lot of questions about this. This is not clear in my head yet. I mean, the moving parts. There's a lot of moving parts here, and the thing that sticks in my one of the things that Tom said here that stuck into my head was 22 on page 3. Identified LCI as hungry, nimble, and a local competitor. That says to me, okay, that's important. That might be important for us to look at. And I want to know what that means. I want to know what he means by that. And I suspect what he means by that is the fiber optic issue. For the long-term build out, if we're going to do a long-term build out, we should do it with the most current technology we have, knowing full well that fiber optic probably will be replaced by something else, in 5 years. But right now, that's my concern. So I'd like to definitely have a group look at this and talk about it, because I need to come up to speed on a lot of this information,
Just real quick also, I know exactly what Desiree is referring to in regards to having lags on your internet, especially the restaurant I work at. We offer obviously Wi-Fi, and you have every single person in the restaurant clickety click click click, and then I have to run a credit card, and it's tick 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 tick, and then at the end of the night, our staff all on their phones, and I have to close out the batch for the end of the day, tick 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 tick, same thing. So I understand 100% what you're talking about. And I remember going to that first initial meeting that when they had, I'm sorry, forgive me, I don't remember the gentleman's name who came, and we met up at Booth Bay town office. And I remember them talking about that hotspots were a good starter point because, first of all, they were less expensive to contend with. And yes, ideally, everybody wants fiber, yes, but I think if I had to have a choice in the matter, I would say finding central points in the two towns that would maximize the people to have the proper bandwidth through a hotspot. That's what I would suggest.
Well, and may I just interrupt you to say, please come tomorrow night, because we're doing the demonstration up at the town office, our town office, with the hotspot with LCI.
And that's at when?
6:30 tomorrow.
Gotcha.
As far as, you know, and not to get off topic with anything, but it's more likely with the restaurant, the software on your end, it's your wireless router and it's maybe whatever other pieces of equipment you have going on, are more likely to be bottlenecking your speeds than the lines coming in. But I think this is where digital literacy, again, is important, because you can't fix your problem if you don't know where it's coming from. At my house, I like to brag about this a lot, and it's obnoxious. I pay $25 a month for maximum 5 megabytes upload download, which is like laughably slow internet. But we had 7 little girls spending the night this weekend, and they were all online at the same time on their phones. So it varies. You know, they weren't all watching YouTube videos, but a lot of the time the problem is software, and that's again where the companies can upgrade. You know, there's the lines that carry the data, then there's a software at each end of the line that interprets and moves the data along, and that's an easy fix. You know, keeping the coaxial cables that we have in place right now. Obviously, they're going to be there for a while. We can still upgrade the service along those lines if we have better software and better end of the line equipment. That's all I'm gonna say.
Tom?
Tom Miners, Blue Bay Harbor. Just, I don't need that. Just quickly, I just want to understand, because I'm a little confused too. Do we own our own telephone poles? Did I hear that?
No.
We don't, do we? Or the electric company that owns it? That's what I thought. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to comment on is I think that obviously free trade is wonderful, and we have 3 providers coming in here now, and I think a lot of it has to do with supply and demand, right? You've got very little demand compared to all the supply and the fiber and everything else coming into down here. So I think that's half of the problem. You've got 3 suppliers and you only have 3,000 households or so. So I'm only talking about Booth Bay Harbor right now. But it would seem to me, if we are going to negotiate with anybody, it would be negotiated from a point of what are we really looking for. Somebody brought up 5G. 5G is coming down the pipe. There's a lot of concern about cancer and things that it could cause, issues that could happen with it. I actually think that's the way it's going to go in a period of time, probably a lot quicker than we all think. So investing in any type of infrastructure that has to do with fiber it's actually been out for, 30 years, 40 years, fiber's been on the street. And to try to invest in something like that and then have it just go away, we'll all end up with egg on our face. I think we should take our time, really understand what we want to do ahead of time, and then move forward very slowly, because the cost to the taxpayer in this community is going to be horrendous if we want to do with a municipal system or something like that. We have to really pay attention to it, that's all. Thank you.
Does the board have any other questions for our Booth Bay colleagues?
Well, thank you for listening to us, and I hope you come tomorrow night to watch the hotspot demonstration, because I think it'll be really neat.
Before you go, I guess you should ask this in the beginning. Is there 1 or 2 things that you would like from the board in a formal action or endorsement or recommendation that you were hoping you would get tonight as you schedule this presentation? I do think, I agree with Joanna that bringing some folks together who are very interested in this. I know the grant originally also included our education system, because one of the concerns is if children go home from school and they don't have adequate internet access, the capacity of them to do their homework or their assignments is really curtailed, and really is a second-class education because of the incapacity that they have to connect at home. And so some critical voices in my mind are missing from this conversation, even though Tom talked to 4 major businesses, and you heard from some unserved folks. So I think trying to figure out who are the key, what are the key perspectives that we need to make sure this is a comprehensive negotiation, and not forgetting what we need for school children, what we need for seniors with home telemedicine done through video face link or whatever, that's also very common, and certainly in rural areas, a way that people get access to care. I just want to make sure we're thinking comprehensively about that. So I'll go back to my first question of what did you hope you'd walk away with tonight, and are we not acting on something that you hoped that we would?
Well, where's my copy? Oh, sorry. I mean, what I supposed I thought, because as I say, I admired Mike's summary of what we had done, and I tried to provide a little bit of information about where it started and what we've learned since then. And I thought, because if you also read the consultant's report, that we've learned a lot more than we used to know about this. And so I think one of the things we've learned is that the problem in both of our towns is a lack of competition. And so if I were to say what I had hoped for, it would be that you thought it was a good idea to go ahead with trying to create an RFP. And as I said earlier, simultaneously, the RFP will be written, and then there's 60 days before somebody has to answer. And in that time, the Citizens Committee could be formed, and we have several people who already have applied to be on the committee. But, and everything you say, Wendy, is correct. I mean, we have to have education, we have to understand all of the uses of internet, but many of those uses are implicit if we have better service. And so, you know, what I feel from you all is that you're not ready to do that, and so you want to have a committee meet and talk about these things. I mean, you know, that's your judgment. So it's what I hoped, because I have found the report to be convincing, and the strategy we have for going forward to be convincing. It does not preclude any of the other things we've heard, other committees, education, the necessity to be sure that all the different ways people need to be served are served. But, and I think those will, if we form the committee and we talk for the 2 months during which the RFP is being circulated among people and they respond to it, that all of that will come out, because it isn't very mysterious. I mean, the ways that the internet can be used isn't mysterious. Our problem has been, I mean, in part, I mean, what Desiree said, in part it's the software, but it's, with these providers, it's the power that they're giving to us. So, I mean, it's fine. You listen to me, and I appreciate it, and I hope you all come tomorrow night.
Hi, I think I'm on a slightly different page. I personally want to see the committee formed so that we can get community buy-in for the project, like Tom brought up. It could get expensive, and maybe it's something we want to invest in as a community. Maybe, you know, we want to look at all the ways in which we can do this, because there are so many more things than we've had a chance to talk about tonight. There's the municipal option, where a lot of small towns have decided to run their own utility, which sounds overwhelming, but people do it, and I think that we should, you know, look at it and learn more and bring all the voices to the table, so that whatever we all as a community decide to do going forward, we can feel ownership in, we can feel like the voices have been heard, and we're doing what, you know, everyone collectively wants to do.
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Wendy. With that in mind, how does the board feel we should proceed?
Well, have a committee.
Okay.
The long and the short, I guess. How I feel.
Was that a volunteer?
Oh, wow. Maybe.
we've got members of the library willing to partner with Booth Bay Resident and, and the library. And there's a suggestion that someone from the school, do we have contacts that maybe are in the technology division or sector in the school that you're aware of?
We can reach out, yeah. I think there's a lot of people at the school who would be good fits.
Definitely business, the business side as well, business owners here.
Yeah, I would say that I think it'd be very helpful for us. Tom Mayette talked to 4 large businesses, obviously, the Garden, Bigelow, Washburn Dowdy, and what was the other one? And the Country Club. We have some businesses, Spruce Point Inn, some, there are some larger businesses here. We have Oceanside also here. It would be helpful to find out a little bit about what their expectations are, because some of those are also being driven by their consumers and customers in the sense of, geez, we're very happy with the Wi-Fi we have. Everyone now comes to a vacation place and they expect that they will have instant Wi-Fi and probably free Wi-Fi. And I do think that would be helpful for us to have some information about here within the downtown area. Are we meeting those expectations? I think that's part of our economic development commitment, is that we want to be able to offer the amenities that people feel give them now a quality experience, although we keep telling them to turn those things off and enjoy the beauty of the harbor. And I don't think we have that information from the Booth Bay Harbor standpoint. I also think that if we dig a little deeper, we might be able to ask some additional questions in that negotiation, or at least that conversation with providers about technical capacities that may not be things that Bigelow and the Garden and Washburn Dowdy and the Country Club are thinking about. In other words, asking the question of, geez, we have a lot of seniors here in our community and healthcare is a big thing, and video conferencing with your doctor or telemedicine. How capable is your system at what price point to do that for seniors on fixed income? Maybe that's a negotiation point that we want to ask directly about that. Frankly, Bigelow shouldn't be thinking about that. That's not part of their book of business, or the Country Club or whatever. So I do think there's value for us to try and define some additional parameters that would be part of that conversation that have not been part of this initial assessment. That's just my own feeling.
Another comment?
Sure.
The other thing I think we should be cognizant of is that there are also multiple providers which supply content. A lot of the content, entertainment, and things that the elderly want to watch, and the people want to watch in their TV rooms and things. A lot of that stuff comes over DSL. It doesn't necessarily have to come over cable. We have to be prepared to, if we are trying to make some changes or negotiate, that some of this stuff may be lost to some of the consumers, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen either, because it is free trade.
Mike McBride, Booth Bay Harbor. Just something to keep in mind. I think high-capacity broadband access is an attraction for particularly younger people to come to the town. I read something the other day. Maine has the 5th worst broadband in the country. And doesn't that relate to the fact that the population in Maine is going down and people are moving out? If we can provide better broadband, we'll get more people here. I spent the last 10 years of my career working from home in New Jersey because I had terrific fiber optic internet access. I could do all my work from home with internet and a phone. If we had that capability, wouldn't people come here to live and work from home? It seems like it's an attraction we ought to advertise, if we have it. But we got to get it first.
Sure. And that matches our strategic goals and from the Comoine report, our comp plan, and everything that we've been talking about.
Yep.
learn more.
Did you really hear that?
I did hear.
Oh, I gotta clear my ears.
Mike, I'll be happy to put my hat in the ring if you need somebody from the business side.
Sure.
Very
Um,
While you're thinking, I just want to thank the librarian, Joanna, because I know she was a contributor to the original Maine Community Foundation grant and helped get the grant and make sure the library was seen as a key information resource, because we have a lot of people that use the library as their source to get on the internet, and I really thank the library for providing both that leadership and that service. And I know Joanna's volunteered to be a participant in the committee. I hope she still feels that way. And we also had some individuals associated with the community center that were also interested in this topic, and kind of waiting for a committee discussion to occur.
Well, it sounds like we're at that point. We have over the next week or so, individuals reach out to the, excuse me, to the town office, express their interest, and we'll start to collect names and coalesce a group and keep this on the forefront. Seem reasonable? Okay. Any other topics about?
Mike, I just want to mention, we still have applications sitting in the town office from last fall when we started to do this. So we have blank applications. I don't know if Booth Bay has applications as well. They probably do. But if people want to join this, they should come in and fill out an application so that we can put them all together.
Great.
Great.
Thank you, Tom. Okay. Well, thank you, Booth Bay. Thank you, Library, for being here, for audience, for the comments, too. Yeah, appreciate your input on this topic. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wow. Was there any other public comment on broadband? Okay, great. It's that fun time of year when we look into our crystal balls and say, what is it that we as selectmen would like to talk about in terms of some strategic goals? My thought here was for us to bring up a handful of topics that we felt passionate about, that we thought meshed with our future, and bring them up for discussion, and then as the weeks go on, we refine and decide which ones are worth pursuing and which ones we'll hold on to bring back next year. So with that in mind, I'll start off. How's that? I've got a list of projects that we've got in progress, and I'm just saying this more to show my support for them, that I want to continue with them, and 4 projects that are in process and 4 that are relatively new. And the first is and this is in no particular order, is the Atlantic Avenue sidewalk feasibility. I know we've started to get information about that, and I just feel it's great that we are moving forward as part of a larger look on sidewalks and crosswalks throughout the town. I know that the work's been done on the Route 27 corridor sidewalk, and I'm just excited to hear about what the bid process and the analysis is to move forward on that. There's an affordable a workforce housing initiative that's in progress, and I just want to show support for that. And I know we have next steps coming up with input and designs and more ideas on the footbridge. So I just want to show my support for those existing. For new projects, I won't claim this one as my own. Chris Swanson of the Planning Board has contacted an individual that runs the organization called Museum in the Streets. And there's a number of towns that have done this all over the country, specifically Wiscasset, Belfast, Portland, great. And it's basically a way to celebrate the town's architectural and cultural history. And it's done through a series of informational panels, a couple of large introductory ones and some smaller ones throughout the town, but it's also customized to our community. You get a group together, you talk about the history and what the stories are, and out of this comes locations for the signage. We talk about having a walkable town, and we're able to mark out maybe a pathway or a loop where these historical places are. Tom did a good job a few years ago with the "You Are Here" signs, and this is something that could be added to that. So that's my first one. The second one doesn't cost us anything other than time, and I'm calling it Peninsula Selectmen Collaboration. One of the things I really appreciate at the joint meeting that we had, was it last week? Sorry, I'm fuzzy on time, with the Booth Bay Selectmen, just like tonight, was the opportunity to learn, listen, understand, and what I would like to see is a series of rotating meetings. I don't know what the time frame should be, if it's quarterly, if it's less than that, if that's more, but the idea that we share information, we talk about potential collaboration, and look for opportunities. Tom, you probably know more about this, I'm sure you do, than I. I know there's opportunities for cost saving with paving and salt and sand, and you may very well do some of that, but maybe there's some other ones. So that was one of my goals. I know we've talked about doing for lack of a better name right now, we're calling it a harbor master plan, and the planning board has done some initial work on that. I know that there are next steps that can be done. I just want to show my support for that. And then the other one was broadband, and I think we beat that up for about an hour. So I'll be quiet, but those are my strategic goals. Who would like to go next?
Let me go, because I'm going to piggyback on some of the things you said. Number one on my list was the Harbor Master Plan. I think the one thing, if we learned one thing over these last 18 months, is how important it is to have an overall structure and plan for the area around the harbor. It's very important. I think we need to do that. And I'd like to go one step further. I would really like to see that shepherded by a town planner who has some experience in water-related use, land use, and zoning. Because I think what we're really talking about, if you take a look at the harbor really goes from the DMR all the way around to the inner harbor, all the way out probably to David Bean at the end of Road's End. That's the harbor. Now, if you take a look at that space, you have every possible use you could possibly think of in that space. And I think it's important to analyze it, to figure it out, and make some plans. So for me, that would be a really important item from the experience I think we've had over these last 18 months. The second thing for me is the sidewalks. I think in what I call the central business district downtown, the walkability, the idea that people like to walk around this town, and there are spots where you can't really walk safely. Okay, the one spot we highlighted the other day was going from Townsend to Oak Street. People are now parking on Townsend to go up to the Thistle. There's a lot of people going up and down that street at night. Okay, that's one spot which we should look at. I imagine there's other spots as well, but that needs to be a comprehensive evaluation. What do we have? What's the condition? And where are the places we can put sidewalks that will help people? Atlantic Avenue clearly was one we raised at our last meeting. And I would also talk about the pedestrian crossings. We need to evaluate those a bit and find out the ones that we have control over and the ones we don't. But certainly we should look at that. And then one other thing, this is on my wish list. Someone approached me early on. We were talking about the need for housing in this town. And Dan Breyer's project is wonderful because that is a great resource that we're going to have. But we have another resource. We have an entire town of homes that are dark in the wintertime because they don't have utilities, water and sewer. Okay? Imagine for a moment if we had broader water and sewage to these buildings, people could then convert them to all-year housing. They may have more value. They might sell these houses to people who would live here and have some kids. Okay, that's another very valuable resource. So I'd love to sit down maybe with Chris Higgins and the water to find out what possibilities we have. I know it's finite. I mean, the sewers cannot have unlimited amount of people, but wouldn't it be great if we kind of looked at that and said, maybe there is some possibility for expansion for some all-year housing. So that was one. And then signage. I love the idea of the signs. I mean, people come into this town, they don't know which way is up. And there's so many signs everywhere. you're more likely to have an accident reading the signs than finding what you're looking for. You know, the truth of the matter is. So I'd love to see if we could resurrect that a bit. Okay. I'm done.
Very good.
So there's gonna be a bit of redundancy here. First off, the housing project, absolutely, I think that move is awesome, but also, there's something that we're missing on housing is for seasonal workers. We do have a lot of seasonal workers, and even where I work, we have a lot of people coming from far, far away, and my boss owns a home specifically to put them there so they have a place to live. But unfortunately, we're fortunate, but not everybody is. There's a couple of places like New Wagon does it, Lincoln Bay has it, but they're huge resorts and they can do it. But for other people, they can't afford to just buy a property for their seasonal workers. And that's something that has to be kind of go tandem with that housing, project that we're already working on. Because yes, it's ideal, but we want to have that too. Both options, long-term and short-term housing. The next next two actually, have been on my list always, every year. First one is parking. Surprise. Yeah, we need to work on the parking situation, and I have mentioned a few times about putting in a parking garage, and I don't know if people like the idea, I don't like the idea, but I've looked into other ways to have a parking garage that actually, it's not this unsightly cement block. It can be beautiful. That's one of them. The other one is public transport. I still don't understand why our town doesn't have it. You just have a couple of people that run the cabs at night, and that's it. But I took a drive over to Southport today, and I was like, there are people who live out there that might want to just hop on a bus or something and come into town, or find their way to Wiscasset or something like this. I think it was something that we should really definitely look into, because at least it allows also, again, for seasonal workers that don't have cars, a way to get about. Because they're left to just getting a bike from the Rotary, which is very great, but that's all they have. They can't get anywhere. And then last one is pretty simple, I think, like a low-hanging fruit, if you will. It has to do with the walkability, but it has more to do with the walkability in the winter. I know that at the restaurant, because we have so many people come in, and there's people that are trying to get about, and there's inclement weather. So, and I know a few years back we got the Bobcat, which helps a lot, but we might want to consider getting another one because I don't think that they can keep up. And where we're having more and more people coming about, and especially during the Gardens Aglow, and they're trying to walk through the town, go to this store, that store, whatever, and the snow is piled up or it's iced over or something like that. That for me, I think, is a lower hanging fruit. That's about it.
Thanks, Trish.
Go ahead.
You all already mentioned everything on my list. I have two little items that haven't been mentioned yet, because I agree with everything that's already been said. But I think we've talked about a potential fish pier renovation to one of the buildings over there. So that was number one. The second was just to finish the basketball court project and plantings. So not very exciting ideas, but they have to be on the list.
So I'm taking my cue from the Economic Development Action Plan, which we have a plan for the region and many things that are places where Booth Bay Harbor can take the lead. So certainly the Harborfront Master Plan, which has been discussed, I think should be our very high priority for us. And I actually think we are in the driver's seat, at least for the next steps on that, not the planning board. The planning board put together sort of a skeletal idea, but we are the ones that have the budget amount and really need to sort of lay out the parameters. So this is a doable and reasonable and actionable Harborfront Master Plan. Housing, I think several people have mentioned. I'm really delighted that Dan Breyer has been working on this so hard, and I think Booth Bay Harbor needs to show leadership and get into the game, and we need to, the housing is going to be in our town, so we need to make sure that we are doing everything we can without violating the planning board's due diligence of reviewing this to make sure that this can come about and be done in a quality way that lets people have a very nice place to live that we're very proud to have in our community. And I think we need to be part of that assessment and helping grease the skids so it comes about. Wayfinding, we mentioned, I think we should do that. And I think we need to have some real candid conversations about the future of our regional and town collaboration. I think we have just put our toes in the water on that. There was diversity of opinion at the working group about whether that should happen formally or whether we should just rely on informal ways that we intersect together over tasks or projects. My own observation is that when we rely on informal mechanisms, we kind of default back to doing things within our own sphere and we lose the opportunity to collaborate. But collaboration takes time and it takes work and it takes leadership. And we need to determine if we have both the time and energy and wherewithal to make that happen or continue to happen. So I think that's a very high priority for us moving ahead.
Thank you, everyone. Those were very thoughtful, quite illuminating, and I've got notes here. I think what I'm going to do is just summarize what everyone has said, and we'll put it in a working document that everyone can have and go off of, and we start to select next steps from each one of those. I have no other new business on the agenda. Is there any old business?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Moving along into public forum. Your chance to speak. Our audience. Hello.
I will ask you a question, following up on something Wendy said.
Could you introduce yourself?
Nancy Prisk, Southport.
Thanks, Nancy.
Following up on something Wendy just said as a future goal, I'm wondering if this might be the right moment to give a quick 2-minute synopsis on what Southport is doing for broadband. Would that be helpful?
Sure. 2 minutes, that'd be great.
As Wendy knows, Mike and I both serve on the Regional Planning Commission, and regional planning is essential in my mind in terms of where we can go as a peninsula. 3 years ago, Georgetown and Arousek started to do some research on what they could do collaboratively working together. Island Institute stepped in, helped them form a framework. From that framework, they knew that they needed to look at the network that could be built out, the network that existed for what was providing their broadband at that point, and what the potential was in the future. Southport, following up on our initial work with the JEDC, Southport split off at the suggestion of Island Institute, and we have joined to form Three Bridged Islands Group. 2 years ago, we put out an RFP to do an engineering design study. That is the first step, to see what the providers have. You can do that yourselves. You hire a consultant that is hired to do that type of work specifically. We hired Axiom. And from that engineering study, we decided that we wanted fiber to the home every home. We wanted an opportunity to provide the backbone for the future, and the future is fiber. Fiber's been here a long time, it's going to be here a long time, it's going to provide the other services down the road. It's going to be the backbone piece. We decided that serving everyone in our community made a tremendous amount of sense when you look at the medical side of it and you look at the educational side. So we've moved forward with an RFP. We have selected a build-out company. We've not announced it publicly, so I can't say yet who it is. But we will be building out a fiber system that will encompass Southport and then Georgetown and Arousek. We have also selected an ISP, a provider. Again, we can't say who that is at this point. We also have just completed an application for USDA funding. The USDA loans to build networks are very doable. USDA has just met with all of the providers in Maine, including ConnectMe, as a state agency, and also with the USDA also met with folks in the legislature to talk with them about the methods for doing the funding, both grants and loans. So we have very much moved forward, and I think if there's only one thing that kept us back, it was not having enough expertise on our committee. And so we had to take a small step backwards about a year ago and brought in some very specific folks to be on our committee to help us with the finance calculations, basically to save us from having to spend money for consultants. So we boosted our committee from 5 people to 8 people. We meet every single Tuesday from 10 o'clock to noon, and sometimes our meetings can go till 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. We all go. We have been able to build this program because of the incredible commitment on the part of the 8 people that are currently involved. So I just give a heads up, get a committee and pursue all of the options. And we are not looking at the current providers. I won't say a lot more on that. It just isn't, what's provided right now is not what's going to get us into the future. The schools, the libraries have fiber. Your library has fiber, but you can't build consumer fiber off of that unless some of the rules change within the states. So it does mean building a whole new network. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nancy. Anyone else? Anyone up here? Great. Okay. I'll accept a motion to accept the warrants on approval.
So moved.
Second.
Great, thank you. We are going to move, I'm moving forward. All in favor? Thank you. Appreciate the nudge. Next, we've got an executive section under Title I, Section 405-6A. So I'll accept a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Great. Thanks everyone for being here, and enjoy Windjammer Days.